It started with a single photograph. A young boy, knees pulled tight to his chest, face buried in the chest of a golden retriever. The dog's forelegs wrapped around him, not loosely, not clumsily, but deliberately, like arms, like comfort, like knowing no one knew who they were. No caption, no location, just the boy and the dog. And the hug. That photo floated quietly through corners of the internet at first. Tucked between cooking videos and daily news, it slipped past algorithms and landed softly in people's feeds. Then something happened. People kept stopping, scrolling, then scrolling back. Some said it reminded them of a dream they couldn't quite remember. Others saw the dog's eyes wide, brown, waiting, not looking at the boy, but at the camera. And in that stare was something strange. Not an instinct, but intention, as if the dog knew someone would be watching. Comments followed. Is the dog hugging him? How does he know to hold like that? Who taught him that? No one had answers. For a while, the image stood by itself, quiet, unexplained, until, one early morning, a comment appeared under a reposted version of the photo. That's Chance, and this is how he always loved. From that whisper in a comment thread, the trail began. Not everyone believed it. Some thought it was a sweet fabrication, an internet ghost story. But others followed the people who needed it to be real. The ones who understood that sometimes love doesn't wait to be taught. It finds its own way. And so the question stayed unspoken, curious, heavier than anyone expected. Who was the dog who hugged? And how did he learn? It began on a farm tucked between misty hills in Vermont, where the air turned gold every autumn and the mornings smelled like apples and wood smoke. A litter of golden retrievers was born under a shaky red barn. 7 pups, soft-bellied and drowsy, barely more than puddles of fur. They tumbled over each other, chewed ears and tails, and scrambled toward milk with barely open eyes. All except one. He was quieter, smaller. A pale stripe down his spine set him apart, thin as a whisper and shaped like a feather. While his siblings chased shadows and shredded newspapers, this one would crawl slowly, deliberately into the folds of someone's lap. He'd place his chin on his shoulder, then press his body in close and still. Not a cuddle, not play, a pause, a presence. He does this thing, said the farmer's daughter, maybe 10 years old, her fingers tangled in the pup's ruff, like he wants to become part of you, like he's hugging. At first, they thought it was a fluke, a baby thing, just one dog out of 7, being unusually affectionate. But then it kept happening. Visitors dropped by. One leaned down to tie her shoe and found the pup perched beside her, forelegs gently hooked around her arm. Another knelt to fill the water. Bow, and before he could stand, the dog had moved in and rested his chest against his spine like a weighted blanket. Eventually, the shelter coordinator arrived. A woman with paper-thin glasses and laugh lines in the shape of parentheses. She observed in silence. On the 3rd visit, when the pup approached, again deliberate still, offering his quiet press of chest and posh, she knelt down and let him fold himself around her. For a moment, she didn't breathe. Then, without looking up, she said, "This one. He needs a different path." They named him Chance. No reason, at first, just instinct. But as Chance grew, the name began to feel like something chosen not for what he was, but for what he might offer. A chance for what? No one could quite say. At 8 weeks old, he was tucked into a cloth-lined carrier and driven through fading maple groves toward a small training center where dogs were taught things most people would never have the patience to learn. Sit, stay, fetch, guard, and sometimes save. But Chance wasn't made for commands. Not really. He was attentive. Yes, listened, without blinking, but his responses didn't come from drills. They came from something else. Something rooted deeper than instinct. When a new trainer arrived to walk him for the first time, Chance stood up on his hind legs before the leash even clipped and placed his front paws around the woman's ribs. Just 3 seconds, no sound, just presence. She didn't walk him that day. She knelt, arms shaking slightly, and whispered, "I didn't know I needed that." By the end of his first week at the center, the trainers had revised the evaluation forms. One had scratched out temperament and simply written one phrase in capital letters: "He hugs." By the first snow, Chance had settled into the rhythm of the training center, its steady routines, its measured commands. The other dogs, sleek and precise, learned quickly. Sit meant sit, stay meant still, and no meant no. Chance heard it all, watched, understood. But he moved differently. Where others obeyed like soldiers, Chance behaved like a listener. He didn't rush. He responded calmly, as though waiting for some silent language that only he could hear. The trainers noticed. Some grew frustrated. "He's not slow," one said. "He's just waiting for the point." Others were more patient. They saw what he did when the training ended, when the leashes came off and the sessions dissolved into tired chatter and soft sighs. That's when Chance truly emerged. The hallway was quiet on a grey afternoon when it happened. Maya, a girl whose voice was rarely louder than a whisper, sat on the floor with her knees to her chest. Her breathing shallow, her hands twisted into her sleeves. Nobody noticed, not right away, but Chance did. He padded over on silent feet, no command, no encouragement, and slowed just before reaching her. Then, not abruptly, but as if pulled by the gravity of sorrow itself, he folded himself around her, pressed chest to chest, forelegs draped gently over her back. No muzzle licking, no playful bark, just weight. Warmth, a dog's quiet answer to a storm no one else could see. Maya exhaled, deep, ragged. Then still, one of the trainers, rounding the corner, stopped mid-step. Watched, frozen, until the girl reached up and fingers found fur. No one had ever taught Chance to do that. That evening, they wrote a note in his progress sheet. Just 5 simple words, circled in pencil. He knows without being told. Weeks passed. More dogs came. Some graduated, others did not. Chance remained. He learned enough to pass the basic tests, could navigate doors, recognize emergency cues, but his real strength was less definable. One counselor called it intuitive response. Another just called it love. Soon they gave him exceptions, while other dogs drilled obstacle courses. Chance was allowed to spend time in observation spaces, lounges where children learning emotional regulation could interact. That's when they saw the pattern. Tension would rise in the room, anxiety, a fight brewing, a child retreating into silence, and before any adult could move, Chance would be there, not inserting, not correcting, just hugging. He always chose the one who needed him most, not based on noise or tears, but something quieter, something unspoken. They stopped trying to map it, stopped trying to name the skill. Instead, they made a new column in his file. Not tricks, not commands. Just this: empathy response, exceptional. Then came the visit from an evaluator. one of the senior members from a regional service dog accreditation program. She spent most of the afternoon examining records and cross-referencing behavior reports. Finally, she asked to see Chance in action. He doesn't follow demonstrations, the head trainer warned. He follows something else. The evaluator crossed her arms. Let's see. They brought in a boy named Eli, 10 years old. Severe PTSD. Public interaction was nearly impossible. He stood in the corner of the room, staring at the floor, arms folded so tightly his fingertips had turned white. Chance didn't go to him right away. He watched, waited, then without cue or word approached slowly, and instead of going straight to the boy, he lay down a few feet away, head on his paws. Minutes passed. A silence so deep, someone shifted in their chair just to break it. Then Eli slowly knelt beside the dog, didn't speak, didn't touch Dot until inch by inch. The boy leaned in and wrapped his arms around Chance's neck, a hug. The evaluator blinked. Quickly, she didn't look up from her notes, but when she stood to leave, her eyes were clouded. Put him through, she said. Not because he performs, but because he sees. Theo's world was quiet, but never still. He moved through it like he was always bracing flinching from sounds before they came, watching lights like they might jump out and burn him. At school, he wore headphones that wrapped his ears like armor. At home, he stacked the same 3 books, over and over, always in the same order. Always at the edge of the sofa, his mother, Marla, tried everything. Weighted blankets, lullabies on loop, softly spoken books. But nothing held. Nighttime was worst. The dreams came in fragments, wide eyes, falling, the sharp crack of something breaking. And when he awoke, it was as if he had drowned. His chest would seize. The room would spin. Sometimes he screamed and didn't stop until he lost his voice. One winter, Marla spoke to a counselor who mentioned service dogs. Not just any, but emotional support trained companions. There's one, the woman said slowly, who doesn't need cues. Doesn't wait for instruction. Marla didn't understand what that meant. Not then. Still, she signed the paperwork. Filled in boxes she wasn't sure, applied to Theo. Waited on. The day Chance arrived, it was snowing lightly. Theo didn't react. He was pacing in slow circles, his fingers fluttering against his sides like shaken leaves. Chance walked in, not eager, not cautious, just ... present. He didn't bark or wag, or bow. He simply sat, waited, tilted his head once, and then, unprompted, moved forward. He crossed the room carefully. His steps matched not to Marla's breathing, but to Theo's pacing, like a pattern only Chance could see. Then slowly as melting ice, Theo stopped. No one breathed. Chance reached out, placed his forelegs against the boy's side, and leaned in, not heavy, not sudden, just a still, soft hold. Marla cried, not loudly, but enough that she covered her mouth. No one had touched her son like that in years, without fear, without needing something, without permission, just ... love. That night, Theo touched the dog's fur for the first time. It was tentative, one finger at a time. By bedtime, he fell asleep on the floor beside Chance. His hand knotted into the ruff at the dog's neck. He didn't wake screaming. Not once in the months that followed. Something changed. Small things at first. Theo walking a little slower through crowds. Theo asking barely audible, "Where's Chance?" When the dog left the room, Chance began to learn the rhythms of the boy's mind. When sound became too much, he placed himself between Theo and the source. In waiting rooms, he positioned his body like a shield. In playgrounds, he herded with softness, guiding Theo gently from overstimulation to shelter. But most often, he hugged. He hugged when Theo's jaw clenched so tight he forgot to breathe. Hugged when the boy fixated on the turning of wheels or the flapping of curtains. Hugged when the mirror felt like too many eyes. Sometimes, teachers would watch them in hallways, child and dog. Wrapped in a moment, neither could forget how to speak. On one particular morning, Marla found Theo curled into a sunbeam on the living room carpet, fast asleep with Chance coiled behind him like a second spine. She didn't take a photo. She didn't want to bind it in pixels. She just watched, holding her breath, because for the first time, she saw him at rest, not surviving, but safe, and even then, she knew this wasn't the end of the story. This was the middle, the sacred, necessary middle where love came quietly, on four legs, and with arms hidden in fur. After that first winter, Chance became less like a dog and more like breath, something Theo didn't always notice, but always needed. He wasn't leashed unless required. He wasn't called unless far away. Mostly, he appeared quietly, like he'd always been there. In school, Chance was given special clearance to sit beside Theo's desk. On most days, he barely moved. But when the room grew loud, or when the ticking of the clock became too much, Chance would rise. He'd place his paws gently in Theo's lap, press just enough to be felt, and then rest there, anchoring the boy without holding him down. On difficult mornings, when the light through the kitchen window made Theo flinch and fold in on himself, Chance would lean his weight, close, not pressing, not demanding. Just there, as if saying, "You don't have to start the day alone." There was no schedule, just trust. In the spring, when a fire alarm startled the building into chaos, Theo dropped to the floor in a panic, hands over his ears, eyes wide with fear. Amid the shuffle of feet and shouted instructions, Chance didn't bolt. He turned, found his boy, pressed his body against him like a wall, and didn't move until a teacher came and spoke the words softly. "We're safe now." Some children began watching for Chance in the hallways. A girl who hadn't spoken in weeks once whispered 2 words, "Golden friend," as he passed her lobby bench. One day each month, a small group of students was allowed to sit with Chance during lunch. They didn't always talk, but they always left a little straighter, a little lighter. When Theo got the flu, slept 3 days straight and mumbled through fever dreams, Chance barely left his side. He followed each toss and turn, adjusting himself like a second blanket, nose touching cheek. When Theo coughed, Chance would rise, check him, then curl back around. Marla once joked she could tell the boy's temperature by the height of Chance's ears, but not every day was heavy. Sometimes, Chance hugged out of simple joy. When Theo laughed rare and sudden, the dog would paw at his shoulders and lift, 4 legs curving around him as if dancing. It didn't last long, just a held breath against the world. And when difficult news came once, when a neighbor's car hit a deer in front of the house, Theo crumbled. He hadn't even known the deer, but his shoulders shook with the weight of something nameless. Chance approached, circled once, and leaned in slow. A hug, not for reason, but for the ache of feeling everything too deeply. Those moments, those private, wordless pockets of time began to ripple outward. Other parents began asking Marla if Chance could visit their homes. Always with care, always for an hour at most. One girl, age 7, had selective mutism, She didn't speak at all, not to adults, not to peers. Yet when Chance entered, she reached for his paw, whispered, barely audible, "Hi." Marla teared. Up afterward in the kitchen. In quiet ways, the dog trained no one, but touched everyone. Teachers talked about implementing empathy breaks. A therapist started offering sessions outdoors, under the belief that something about watching Chance and Theo simply be together made hearts breathe easier. One sleepy summer evening, thunder rolled in too soon. Unforecasted. Theo panicked. Hard and fast. He fled from his pillow, stumbled down the hallway, hands to his ears. The power flickered. Marla called softly from the other room, but Theo didn't hear. Chance did. He found the boy curled beneath the couch. Without waiting, he gently nudged open the gap between frame and floor and wedged himself in, too big for the space, too determined to care. He draped one foreleg over Theo's back and held still. Theo stopped shaking, even in darkness. Even with noise crashing over the roof like waves, the hug came. It never needed light. It only needed presence. And when the storm passed and the silence returned, a mother watched from the hallway what can only be described as a miracle, clothed in old fur and deep knowing. The neighbors, when they spoke of Chance, sometimes called him mythical, as if he weren't entirely of this world. The dog with arms, someone once said. The one who teaches stillness. But Theo didn't give him a name beyond what he'd always been, Chance. Because for all he'd given, for all the wreckage he soothed, the storms he calmed, the breaths he gave back, Chance never asked for more than to be where he was most needed, which, more often than not, meant wrapping himself again and again around a boy born with lightning in his bones, and turning that storm into something warm enough to rest inside. It started with a limp, just a small favoring of the back leg when the mornings were cold. Marla noticed first, of course. She kept telling herself it was nothing, maybe a cramp or the way he curled at night. But Theo saw it too. He didn't ask. He only touched Chance's leg gently, tracing the fur with nervous fingers, and whispered, "It's okay. I won't let it hurt." Then came the hesitations, a pause before leaping into the car, a slow lowering to lie beside the bed, a long breath after coming in from the cold. Chance still hugged, still responded, still found the pulse of sorrow unwrapped himself around it. But something was changing. Theo turned 11 as the leaves began to fall. Marla baked a cake in the shape of a sun, the only shape Theo thought felt warm. Chance sat beside the table, head gently resting on Theo's lap throughout the singing. He didn't try to eat the cake. He didn't move. He just stayed there like the anchor he'd always been. That night, Theo didn't want presents. He asked to sleep on the floor again beside Chance, the same way he used to in the early days when he was afraid of the dark. Marla watched them from the doorway, her boy's arms wrapped around the aging golden retriever, the two bodies still as dusk. Chance breathed slowly, deeply, and Theo listened. By October, the walks grew shorter. The stairs became a hesitation, but Chance kept rising. Every morning he met Theo at the doorway, shoulders stiff but eyes as soft as ever. Every night he hobbled to the side of the bed, lifted his head and, with effort, placed one foreleg on the mattress. A hug, always. The hug he gave it before meals, before panic, before anything that might take strength away from him. As if he knew his time was winding, thin and wanted the boy to know. The hugs came. 1st November arrived with frost. One morning, Theo didn't come downstairs for breakfast. Marla found him still in bed, the covers pulled halfway down, and beside him, Chance, still curled into his usual spot at the edge of the mattress, paws tucked gently near where his heart used to beat. His breathing had stopped sometime in the blue hush before dawn. There was no sign of pain, no whimper, just quiet. Theo didn't cry at first. He laid his hand on the dog's back, palm flat and steady. Then he whispered something no one else heard. Later, he said he'd been dreaming of the fields from a summer they'd once visited, golden light, wide sky. He was lying in the grass, and Chance was there, behind him, protecting his back, warm like a firelit room. I told him thank you in the dream, he said, and he hugged me one last time. The days after felt hollow. The air in the house didn't move, the same every silence sharper, waiting to be filled. Theo didn't speak much. He kept his hands in his pockets, walked slowly. But one afternoon, a week later, the storm came. It wasn't thunder or sound, it was the memory. Theo collapsed beside the old dog's bed, clutching a stuffed retriever Marla had once given him in kindergarten. His tears came without warning, unstoppable and broken. His face disappeared into the toy's fur, the way it once had into Chance's chest. Lila, Marla's niece, stepped into the room without knowing. She saw him there in the light that slanted across the floor, the soft toy clutched to the body that had carried too much love, and now too much missing. She didn't speak. She took one photo. The collar lay to the side. The world saw a boy and his dog holding, healing end. They didn't understand that the dog was already gone. But Theo knew. He looked at the photo one night and whispered, simply, he came back. Just for that one. And somehow, it didn't hurt quite as badly. It began as a ripple, small, quiet, unnoticed at first. The photo, taken without fanfare, traveled quietly through message boards, email forwards, social feeds that forgot about it 5 seconds later, until someone stopped. Then someone else did, and someone else. Whispers turned into reposts. Captions changed. Some said the dog was comforting the boy after a sibling died. Others claimed the boy rescued the dog, and this was how the dog said thank you. Most of it untrue. All of it tender. The image had no watermark, no source, but it stayed. You couldn't see the boy's face. Only his hunched shoulders, the tight clutch around a brown stuffed animal, a faded dog bed beside him, and a golden collar lying forgotten by the edge of the frame. And yet, hearts pressed against screens. People called it a miracle without needing facts. Because somehow, it felt like one. In a world loud with chaos, where kindness is often staged and empathy sold in inspirational fonts, the photo didn't ask for anything. It didn't try. It just showed one boy mourning in the only way he knew by, holding onto something soft and loving. And what made people stop, again and again, was this. The way the stuffed dog mirrored the embrace. The quiet, uncanny echo of a real hug. Imperfect, yes, but familiar. Someone commented beneath a popular repost, "The dog looks alive." Someone else responded, "That's not a pose, that's a memory." Marla didn't know the photo had begun to circulate until someone sent it to her with no context. Just a link. She clicked, expecting a recipe or an ad. Instead, she saw her son caught in a moment she hadn't dared interrupt. For a long minute, she couldn't breathe. When she showed Theo, he didn't look away. He studied it like a story he already knew, and finally, he said, "Yeah, that's the hug I was waiting for." She asked what he meant. He shrugged. Then Chance knew I'd need one more. They didn't post about it, never made a statement, never clarified the photo's truth. But the internet filled in its blanks anyway with small fictions and poems and memories from strangers who had loved dogs, lost dogs, needed dogs. A grandmother wrote. It reminded me of how my childhood lab used to rest her head on my chest when I was sad. A teenage boy commented, I didn't cry for 6 years until I saw this. One woman simply wrote, I've never had a dog, but now I feel like I lost one. The image was printed on bookmarks, shared in classrooms, read aloud in therapy circles. It changed nothing, and somehow everything. Still, for Theo, it was never about the photo. It was about what it captured. Because when the world finally saw the dog who hugged, he was already gone. But Theo, who had felt that soft weight return exactly when he needed it, believed something different. Chance didn't leave. Not entirely. He left a hug behind, and it knew how to wait. Theo didn't talk about Chance much after that first year. Not because he forgot. He just learned how to carry it like a pocket keepsake no one else needed to see. Some days it felt heavy. Most days it felt like breath. He still had the stuffed retriever. Its fur was worn to a shine along the neck where tiny fingers used to grip tight. The collar, once draped like a crown, now lived in a box at the back of his closet. It jingled faintly when the seasons changed, as if remembering something. People stopped asking after a while, but love doesn't retire. Not the kind that learns to speak without being taught. Not the kind that stays long after Pawprints have faded from the floors. And besides, Chance had never really left. Sometimes, Theo would be in the thick of a hard moment, lights too bright, a hallway too crowded, the world to fast and pause. Mid-step, not to retreat, just to breathe. Because it would come, that warmth beside his shoulder. The ghost weight, the hush, not imagined, not pretend, just present, a held memory, returning dot. When Theo was 15, Lelo, older now, freckled and patient, graduated her first class of therapy dogs. She had volunteered at shelters, apprenticed under trainers, endured exams and sleepless nights. She still remembered the photo, the boy, the hug, the collar on the floor. I just want to help someone remember how it felt. She once told her instructor her final test dog was a retriever. Not golden, but honey brown, with darker ears and a peculiar way of watching people, not for cues, but for emotion. They called him Echo. He was ordinary in most ways, except for one, during training. If someone cried, especially a child, he would rise without a prompt, cross the space, and place his paws around them. Not every time, not for attention, just when it truly mattered, the first trainer to see it. Marked his report with 2 words, reminds me they couldn't explain it. No one could echo past with high remarks in empathy and intuition. Lila brought him to schools, hospitals, and homes. He soothed in silence the way Chance once had, without command, without trophies. And that summer, he met Theo, now 16, longer in the limbs but still soft in the shoulders. Theo hugged Echo. On the first meeting, like he didn't need to learn him, like he already knew. Echo leaned in. Feels the same, Theo murmured. Almost exactly. Marla watched from the doorway, her fingers curled around a coffee mug she hadn't sipped. From in minutes, she smiled, then looked up and whispered, "Thank you." Time kept moving. Theo grew older, graduated, moved to a city. He never replaced Chance, didn't need to, but in quiet moments, when rain drifted against the glass, or laughter came to sharp from the floor above, he'd pause and feel it. A body beside his, a warmth, a wrap, a hug that lived in the language of memory. And if someone asked him, even now, all these years later, how did the dog learn to hug? He would simply say, chance didn't learn it, he remembered.